Thank you for coming to hear us talk. So I'm going to do a little bit of the before, and then my husband Hans is going to do a little bit of the after. So I want to encourage you guys, for the sake of time, to ask questions as you have them, because if we wait till the end, there's a good chance we're not going to have time, and I'll forget and you'll forget. So feel free just to butt in. And okay, so if you don't know about our farm, which we're pretty far away from you, so I don't know why you would. We are 35 acres of vegetables. The farm itself is about 350 acres, but it's corn and soybeans, it's livestock, it's pasture, it's conservation land. So we just do vegetables on 35 acres. We have anywhere between 9 to 12 employees. We do wholesale, we do farmers market, we do CSA. This will be our 9th year, Hans, is that right? We're starting our 9th year? I can't ever remember. It seems like forever. And as we kind of grew and found our place in our market, we deal a lot with season extension. We do a tremendous amount of root crops. And so you'll kind of see our needs in this, knowing how much root crop storage that we do. And this is very specific to us. So you may see this and think, that is totally not what I need, or I need way more, or that's not going to fit my needs. And I hope that you can kind of just take from what we tell you and glean from that to figure out what you need, or what you might do differently. Okay, so I want to talk to you where we came from, because I think when you see what we used for the last 9 years, you can laugh with me and feel my pain and sympathize with me. So when we first started, Hans and I worked full time, and we would come out to the farm Friday after work at around 5, and we would harvest, and we would wash, and we would take to market, and we had no infrastructure whatsoever. We were farming on Hans's dad's land. So this are the radishes. We would just pick them by hand, and one at a time, and then we would put them in this grate and just spray them off with a hose, and then we would bunch them. Or this was some wild garlic that we would fill that wheelbarrow up with water and let it soak, and then clean each one by hand. Now keep in mind, we had no farming experience with vegetables, so we didn't really know an efficient way to clean produce, right? And then as we grew, we built this propagation house. It's a hoop house, but it has a gravel floor and a furnace, so we could start to work in here when it got cold. It had a gravel floor. It was not ideal, and we still didn't have any type of washing equipment. So these were our storage turnips, which we were so excited that we had this many turnips, and we would just wash them in that black tank right there, and by hand, right, in this spot, because it was enclosed and it was warm, and we could turn on the furnace. And you can imagine at this point the cost of production has just tanked if I'm running propane to wash, a few bins of Hockereye turnips. And this is the epitome of all things unsafe when it comes to food. So, after a day of washing, there's no more gravel. It's just mud. It's a lot of mud. And these are harvest totes, in some cases with greens, that are sitting in that mud. There's no pallet. There's no concrete. I'm going to tell you this so that you can keep it just amongst ourselves, okay? This guy's actually smoking a cigarette, and I told him to hide it for the picture. We had no idea about food safety. It never even crossed our mind. I mean, he must have kind of known, because we told him to hide it, right? But we weren't taking it seriously. I don't think we were scared enough, to know that this is a real problem. Nobody had told us not to. Hans and I smoked, so it's what you do. You take a break right next to the vegetables that you're washing, and you have a cigarette, right? So eventually, we got some sense, and we moved into this old corn crib, and it was 3/4 of a mile away from the farm, so we had to drive to the corn crib with our product. But it had a roof, and it had walls, and it had some space, and our farm was starting to grow. And what's interesting about this is we stayed in this until last summer. I mean, we made this work for the last 5 very, very uncomfortable years in this, and our farm grew tremendously, still utilizing that same structure. And you can see, I mean, if you've been in an old corn crib, you know what it looks like, right? It's not meant to be a safe area to wash produce in. And this had been occupied by the previous tenant was kind of like a hoarder. It was just packed full of everything you could possibly imagine. So we cleaned it out as best as we could. We had lots of natural light as it shone through. And in the winter, the snow would drift in, and there'd be piles of snow, and everything would be wet. And you can imagine trying to keep anything like this clean, right? And raccoons were a huge problem because up in those rafters in that roof, they had been living there for decades. And the birds' nests and all of this little guy's poop, dried up old poop, whenever the wind would blow, a fine dust would settle on all of the surfaces, right? So keeping all of our surfaces constantly sanitized, and even then that still really wasn't enough. But we made it work. I mean, this is such an upgrade. We had concrete. Like, concrete is the best thing ever, and we could finally start to put in place systems, like a sanitizing tote schedule, and we could start using pallets, right? So finally we're getting that produce up off the ground. And that concrete was really important, except the problem with it is there was no level surface to load things into, right? We couldn't use carts, we couldn't use dollies, we couldn't use Packshed or a pallet jack because the only cooler that we had was our trailer. So everything still had to be loaded by hand, which physically was so cumbersome. And I remember the call I got one time. I was at work because I still worked on the farm or off the farm full time. And Hans said, "Oh, we have way more roots than I thought. Like, we have a ton of roots. The frost is coming. We have to get these out right now. We have two options. We can find a place to rent to store the veg, or we can buy one of these insulated shipping containers to use." And I was like, "How much is it?" And I don't know, what is it, like $4,000 for that one? Yeah. But I didn't know what else to do, so we got it. And these are really great. I don't know, does anybody use these for storage on their farm, for cooler storage? The great thing about these is that they are pretty affordable when you're talking about not having to lay concrete. They're movable, so if you're at a temporary place or you're not sure where you want your pack shed to be, these are wonderful for that because you can put it where you need it, and then when you build a pack shed, you can move it somewhere else. There's definitely a lot of drawbacks, and you can get them cheaper than $4,000, but they're exactly what we needed at that point in time on our farm. So we actually ended up getting 5 of them over the last 5 years, probably, and we still use them now. They're great for different temperature zones. You know, like we have one for tomatoes, we have one for our cucurbits, we have one for sweet potatoes. So they're great at keeping different temperatures, and we just cool these with an AC unit and a cool bot. But they're really uncomfortable to work in. I mean, how wide are they?
About 8 feet wide.
8 feet wide. So when you've got stacks of veg on either side and you're kind of walking in between, you just bust your knuckles up. It's extremely uncomfortable. They're very hard to clean. You have to figure out a lighting situation in there. And one of our big things was that we were really tired of touching these vegetables over and over and over again. So these potatoes were harvested and bagged by hand in the field, and then they're being lifted up and put on the hay rack, right? And then we have to lift them up again to load them into the container to store. And then when we wash them, we have to load them out again by hand and then put them into the washer and then take them out by hand and put them into a green tote and then take them by hand again and load them into the cooler. And we have touched these things so many times. So one of the problems was we moved into another part of the crib that had a little bit more enclosure. So we weren't having like that wind blowing at us, but there was no drainage. And when we started to use it, you know, we would drain our wash tanks and we would have water mid-calf, which is a huge food safety issue if you don't have proper drainage. So we just cut a channel in the concrete and put a drain over it, and that's what we use. That's how we got by. But we started to get bigger. We started to invest in vegetable washing equipment with no place to put it and no proper place for the water to drain. We had a huge lake from the drainage water. We called it Lake Bob, and that was where all the water would go from washing. And there's algae in it. I think we could have stocked it with fish. I mean, it was just this huge place, nowhere for the water to go. Not to mention here, you know, we're washing roots, and those coolers are these white bins up here. So we had to drive the roots around here to wash them and then drive them back to put them into the cooler. Totally inefficient, and it got cold. And this corn crib had no heat. Half the doors didn't even close. And it's cold in Illinois like it's cold in Indiana. You know, that wind comes through in the winter. It's a terrible place to work. So this is the lean of the crib that we were washing in. So eventually we just had enough. We moved back to that transplant house, to that greenhouse, and started washing in there again. this brush washer is really heavy, so it takes a ton of people to get it up to the other farm, right? And now you're trucking produce back and forth, and you can kind of just get the sense of like, why are we still farming 9 years later? So then, then we decide to insulate the corn crib. We lower the ceiling, we put up insulation, we painted the walls with a paint that you could clean, right, that you could spray down, and look how nice that is. It's a wonderful place to work, except it's really not. And I have a video to kind of show you, if I can't like tell you enough how bad it was. It's so wonderful to get to vent in front of all of you guys about how because my job is the post-harvest, right? So I'm the one who's in this pack shed with a couple people all the time. In the winter, we would just have a propane heater. And when it was above freezing, you would wash that one day as much as you could in the barrel washer, the brush washer, because it was above freezing and you could. That's when we're washing. All right, I'm going to show you this video. I'm guessing that one of the questions is like, why didn't you build this pack shed sooner? Is anybody wondering, like, why did you do this for so long? Because we didn't have the money. It's really expensive. And you buy equipment that you need. You buy tractors, you buy harvest equipment, you buy, you pay your employees a little bit more, you buy health insurance. Like, for whatever reason, the pack shed was that last thing for us that we just kind of got by until we couldn't get by anymore. All right, you ready? So let me preface this video. We applied for a grant to help fund this pack shed, and this was the grant. We don't normally make videos of ourselves talking like this, but this was, we submitted this to help explain how badly we needed that money for the grant. Hey everybody, my name is Katie Bishop.
Hi, I'm Hans Bishop.
And together we farm PrainErth Farm in Central Illinois. We wanted to take a second to make this video to show you guys our current washing and packing and cooler setup so you can kind of see our need and understand how important this grant money could be to our operation. Hey Hans, what's growing back there?
We got a field of winter rye behind us, and it's cool because this is where some of the winter storage crops for next fall are going to be planted, and we'll have carrots, beets, things like that planted right behind us here.
Awesome, so stay tuned and check out our current wash pack facility. So this is our pack shed. This is an old corn crib. I'll take you inside in just a second. We do some of our washing out here. If the weather permits, that's our barrel washer and a bin dumper. So we can dump the big harvest crates into that barrel washer. So we're just on gravel right now in this old corn crib. So this is in the center channel of the crib. This is where our brush line is. We just washed potatoes today. That's why there's a bunch on the ground. There's no ceiling. So we have to put this plastic up to catch any debris or birds or that type of thing. So what we did last year is we finished out the side of the crib and insulated it, and so we could wash in here all winter. So I'm gonna let Hans show us around in here.
Hi. So this is our washing room, and this is where we've been moving all of our vegetables through, and I think it's quite amazing that we've come this far with this amount of infrastructure. And a couple years ago we finished this out. It's insulated, we can wash down the walls, and it's a lot better than it was before. From seeing the outside of the barn, that was basically what this room looked like as well. I'm not a tall person, and you can see that this is not a very wide space to be working in, and I'm not going to fall over. You imagine like packing a lot of wholesale in here and having boxes on these Nestaflexes, and it's really hard for more than 2 people to work in here and to move product back and forth, and 75% of our washing is done in here as well. So imagine this empty crate is like 50 or 40 pounds of vegetables, and we got to get it into the cooler from the washroom. We got to take a step down here. There's some gravel here as well. We've got a couple doors that might be swinging around in our way. We got this big cooler door here that might swing out and hit us. And then we got to make our way up into the cooler. One of the big challenges that we have in these coolers is, again, the width. It's 8 feet wide, So there's not a lot of room to turn around. You can see that we have bins here on each side, and it's very difficult to even walk down when you're holding a bin and not bump your elbows or your knuckles. The floor is graded, and so excess vegetables
All right, you
fall
guys get the point, right?
in
For the
between
sake of time,
grates.
I think I'm beating a dead horse. So the biggest casualty, though, of this, can I tell you guys, was employee morale, right? Can you imagine how unhappy our employees were and they would leave after 1 year? We couldn't keep them. We had one guy left 2 years. He was so committed and so passionate, but we ran him ragged. Everybody's backs are so tired because nothing can be done with a cart anywhere. We have no usable concrete that you can use any type of cart for. Oh, I don't want you. Oh, yeah, oh, shoot. Okay, you ready? There it is. There's that new bad boy. All right, so employees are happy and they're coming back, right? They're coming back for next year. We have an excellent retention rate. And my back doesn't hurt. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the planning stage that we went through and the financing, which was a bear. Hans is going to talk to you about construction and post-construction. Hans acted as the general contractor in this instance, and so he pretty much, while didn't do the building, he managed all the subs that did do the building, and then we'll open it for questions and answers, but if you have any questions, just talk to us. So for when we were planning for this building, because we had 9 years, right, to plan for it, we toured a lot of farms. We toured 4 in Wisconsin. We toured Nate Parks here from Indiana. We toured his farm just to look at Packsheds, and we purposely toured farms that were larger than us, or what farms, how we wanted to be, right? So these were the 4 in Wisconsin that we toured all of these last year to get an idea. And some of the things I really liked was concrete between the coolers. You know, or this is Steve Pincus in Wisconsin for Tippy Produce, and he grows a lot of storage crops like we wanted to and like we do. And these crates of cabbages were really inspiring, but we knew we wanted to be able to get to them easily and to stack them. This was Featherstone Farm. They're a huge farm in Minnesota that does a lot of CSA. I don't know how many shares they do, but it's just like insane, hundreds of CSA shares. And their space was tiny. And we thought, oh my God, I don't want to have a pack shed like that. But we love, like this is their entire washing half right there. It was not very wide. But they had this great storage. Look how many huge pallet bins that they could stack on there. And we knew that's what we wanted. And this was their drain. And they had to scoop the sediment out with a shovel. And so we're like, oh, okay, that's a cool example of a drain. We might like a drain like that. So the next thing we did is took a lot of food safety courses because we knew that you can't smoke cigarettes while you're washing your Hakurei turnips anymore. But really this helped us to decide how we wanted to build our pack shed and what we had to do if we wanted to pass a GAPS audit, which is something, or a FSMA, to comply with FSMA. So knowing what you need before you get started was important. The biggest one was just the planning. So when we decided to build this pack shed, we thought out 5 years because I'm really tired of modifications. And that's what we had been doing, is modifying the same place over and over again for a farm that was growing really, really rapidly. So we'd modify it for how we were right then, not thinking that, oh, we're going to grow another 5 acres next year, right? So some of the things when you're doing that planning is, how long are we going to be on this land? Do you own it? Do you plan to move to a different part of the farm? And do you want to grow, like not grow food, do you want to grow bigger? Or do you want to shrink in size? Because that's going to determine the size of the business. And what's your FSMA exemption status? And is it going to change? Are you planning on getting bigger that you're going to be required to go through an audit and have inspections? And are you thinking of getting rid of CSA and just doing wholesale? Are you going to need some type of professional storage, like a good cooler that's going to keep things cold, that your wholesale customers at places like at Whole Foods or US Foods or that type of thing that they're going to require? And then what are your must-haves? Do you want it to be run by solar? Do you want to be able to use a forklift? That's going to be wider spaces that you're going to have to turn around. And do you even want it enclosed? Do you want bathrooms in there? Or do you have bathrooms outside? And how big? That's the big one. Get out there with, Hans and I took orange cones and measuring tape and just started measuring areas off. And I'd be like, nope, not big enough. Nope, not big enough. Still not big enough, is it? All right, so the financing was obviously what stopped us all along from doing this when we really, really needed new infrastructure. So we had a mixture of loans, grants, and crowdfunding, and I'm going to show you how much each one so you can kind of get an idea. But again, our needs are different than your needs. So you might not need the cooler that we got, or the concrete, how much concrete we got. So the first one was loans. We took out $170,000 in loans, which was great because we could get a really large amount of money and then stagger those payments over a period of time, but our interest rate's about 5%, and it took a lot of work to gather the data that the banker wanted, and debt is extremely scary when you already have a mortgage for your house and they put your house on collateral. That's really, and we farm, which is so unpredictable, right? And what we did is we went to our local banker, our small town banker, because they know us and they know what we do and who we are, and they're a little bit more willing to make it work for you than saying going to a big corporate bank who just sees you as the, as a huge risk and that they're not going to want to take on your debt. Then we get 2 grants, which is great because it's free money, and who doesn't love free money, but nothing in this world is free, as we all know. We could use that as a down payment, which was important because we didn't have the cash to give to the bank for a big enough down payment for that loan. But the application process was really long. You had to write these essays, right, or do those videos. And it requires a commitment beyond just what you put in that grant. So we got the Frontier grant. You have to sell into Chicago. You have to be in business for 3 years. And that was a really easy grant to get. This next one was through Food, Land, and Opportunity, which is also in Chicago. And it was a pretty big, made up the rest of the grant. But we have to sell to this particular wholesaler for the next 5 years who has like bottom of the bin prices. But it was a big chunk of money, so we kind of weighed our 2 options there. We did crowdfunding. Has anybody ever done like GoFundMe or Kickstarter? Or we did Indiegogo because I felt like that was the best option in terms of money and risk. Again, free money is great, and the awesome thing about it is your community wants to help you. So now they buy in and they're committed to you because they are financially committed to you. Yes?
I think there's one called Barn Raiser now that is agriculture specific.
Yes. We could do Kiva loans. There's lots of different crowdfunding options out there. But just remember that we got $28,000, I think, from our crowdfunding from our community, which is fantastic. But some of that goes to Indiegogo. Some of that goes to the shirts and the hats and all the perks that you have to do to dangle the carrot in front of them to get them to sign up. So if you're going to consider doing financing right now, get your records in order because you're going to need all your bids and all your tax documents and your balance sheet and your profit and loss statements. And it's no joke if you don't already have that. And find someone to help you because it's a lot of work that Hans did. I did not have to do that. All right, so he's going to take over construction. I'm not too far off.
And I would like to point out with the financing and all the statements and documents that we came up with, I just followed along with Richard Wiswall's book and completed all the forms that he had, and that was like in perfect order and really impressed my banker, our banker, and I think that went a long ways to showing them we weren't just a bunch of hippies that were out playing in the dirt. So this is the finished product that we were looking for with the shell of the building. It's a 26 by 90, or not a 26, that's the greenhouse. It's a 40 by 96 foot building. And we started out with a basic floor plan. I built the floor plan in numbers on my computer. And each square, I don't know if you guys can see it, but each square is a square foot. So that allowed us to kind of like say how much space we wanted to devote to a specific wash line or piece of equipment. And when we look back at our Featherstone visit, the space that you saw them washing in that photo was about 15 by 30. So we were like, okay, so we can fit 3 lines like this in here going the length if we have a 40-foot length building, but we've changed the plan many times since then. And this down here is the cooler. So We made a couple of small adjustments from there. This is kind of like where we were standing when we started the video. This is what the site looked like before we actually broke any ground, did any paving. Behind me, like if I'm looking out, I would be looking out towards where the building would be, and then behind me would be the old Packshed. And this overhead power line was right in the way, so we kind of had to like, I was doing a lot of phone calls and getting people to come out for just a quick job, so I had to drop the power line and put another power line in so we could still have functionality back at the old Packshed. Vehicles could still come and go, and business could carry on as usual while all the construction business was starting to ramp up. So once all those things were in place, then we brought in a bunch of gravel. Luckily, we live close to a gravel pit, so we were able to get by without violating any load restrictions at about this time last year. So we just made a whole bunch of trips hauling smaller loads of gravel so we could get the project off and running. And this is what the site looked like before. And you can even see from that video that the barrel washer is still sitting over there in that corner. I mean, there's nothing too sexy here. I didn't do it. We didn't do it. But the contractors, they just are putting ground posts in here. And I guess I got my timing off. That overhead power line is still there, but it was dropped at some point so the trusses could go up. And yeah. One other thing that we didn't mention was that our bank wanted us to be viable, and with the erratic weather that we have, they made it a requirement that we drill a new well and get at least 75 gallons a minute, which was kind of like the sweet spot we were hoping for. That's what Nate had, so that's what I wanted. But at any rate, this is them drilling the well, and we got what we needed. I'm sure everybody has really high mineral and iron content in their water, so our nice white walls aren't as white as they were. But this is the building after we got everything framed up. And we actually had a really bad experience with our builder. I thought it was going to be a lot easier than, I thought the process was going to be a lot easier than I thought. So as Katie mentioned, I was acting as like the general contractor, getting all the people to try to communicate with each other. But the builder, they lost their crew halfway through the framing process. So the building was just sitting there, and it was the most irritating thing in the world in April to not see progress being made on this, because we wanted to get in there by June 1st. We didn't actually wind up getting until August 1st. So, it's like a 2-month delay, but I guess that's what happens when you don't go through a company like Cleary or Morton or something like that. And that would be like my number one suggestion is I feel like our farm business suffered a little bit because I was thinking about too many things and I wasn't thinking about farming. And I should have been devoting more of my time to the field work. Luckily, we have a good crew and it didn't suffer as much as it could have, but I still think it was a big distraction to do something like this and try to take on too much. So we have all these shipping containers, and we know we still want to use them, as Katie mentioned, to have multiple zones for cooling things. And the plan changed about 5 different times as to how we were going to position them. But we knew we wanted one right here up against this wall because that was the one with the mural painted on it, so we still wanted people to be able to see it. And why am I mentioning it now? Because we do a lot of washing in the wintertime. And I like to watch cars drive by the road. No, I'm kidding. Right. You can drive up and get vegetables. So anyway, I had this idea to put the windows way up at the top above where all of the shipping containers wouldn't obstruct the view out or let sunlight in. We do a lot of washing in the winter, and it turned out to be a really good idea, I think, because this is the east wall, so it allows a lot of sunlight to come in, and it really made it not seem so much like a dungeon in January when everybody's just washing away in there. So we got some natural light in, and this is the only window actually that the drive-up window is the only one that's at face level, and giants can't come get their service there. So after we got the frame up, we put this sleeve in the ground. We knew we were going to be washing in the wintertime again, so we wanted to make sure that there was going to be no risk of having any freezing pipes or anything. So the guy trenches the well in, puts the sleeve well inside the wall of the building. It's 3 feet underground, so it's below the frost line. And actually, as we're trenching, we intercept the other well that we have on the property. So we actually have 2 water sources coming into the building. So irrigation is not going to be affected in the summertime with whatever pack operations are happening. And this is just the well set up over here, where we have our variable control flow pump. And it's really nice to have the big well access in there because we can fill up a soak tank in about a minute of 80 gallons, 100 gallons of water. The other decision that we had made was to use radiant heat tubing or radiant heat to heat the building. So the next step was to have the concrete guys come in and start prepping the ground for that. We have 2-inch insulation down here on the ground with a plastic vapor barrier on top, so there isn't any residual groundwater this time of the year that's coming up because it's the only piece of land that's not frozen out there. And then they laid their reinforcing steel on it, and it was very good that they did that because that provides us with our pattern that the company, Nibco, provides you with how you need to actually lay your tubes out. So we've got half of the concrete just poured over here. This is what it looked like before we poured it. And it was kind of a gut-wrenching thing to make sure you had it right because you only have one opportunity to get that right, otherwise it's screwed up forever. So, and we really like the radiant heat system because it's really efficient. You can open a door, it can drop to 30 degrees in there, and then in about 20 minutes after you close the door, you're back to whatever temp it was at before you open the door. So, as Katie mentioned, we were really focused on drainage because we'd had a lot of bad experience in our pack shed before with poor drainage. So there's about a 2-inch slope from each side of the building to this trench drain that is about 25 feet long, I think. And we can pull the grates up, we can get in there, we can shovel it out. There's about a 6-inch fall from the end that I'm standing on in that photo to where the pipe comes to exit the building. So water moves through fast, it moves out. And then also, as it moves out, the pipe that takes it out of the building is actually up above the bottom of the drain by about 3 inches. So it gives you an opportunity to have your sediment come out of the water and not start to plug up any drain pipes on the outside. We also wanted to make sure that our grate was very sturdy because we're going to be driving a forklift, be carrying a lot of weight around in that pack shed, and we also want it to sit flush with the concrete because we're going to be pulling pallet jacks or dollies or things like that around while we're working in the pack shed. And we're very happy with the drain at the end of the day. So this kind of looks backwards. Yes, Eli. It goes into a drain tile, a field tile. And that is one thing that we need to correct because we had a bunch of rain. I don't know which rain event it was, but the field tile was there was too much water for it. And so we actually wound up getting a little bit of water coming up from the field into the drain. It didn't actually come out into the building, but it just filled the drain up. Luckily, it froze again, the water table went down, and it drained. But that is I think that would probably be a problem with GAPS or FSMA or anything like that to have it plumbed into that. So anyway. So this looks kind of crazy here, but there's a reason why we decided to build the building from the inside out. We knew we wanted to use spray foam insulation because spray foam insulation acts like one of those nice koozies on a warm summer day, and it prevents the transfer of, what does it do? It just really, it prevents condensation, and it really seals up tight, and while it only has R7 or 10 or something like that, it actually acts like it has a higher R value. So we built the building from the inside out. We put the inside liner panels on, and then we spray foamed the liner panels. So that way, basically, our building sits inside of a koozie, and there's no condensation from there being a different temperature if you had sprayed the outside walls and the inside liner panels are colder or warmer than the outside. So we also want to make sure that our cooler was as airtight as possible, had the most amount of insulation, and we framed that up as well, built the liner panels on that first, and we sprayed that with 4 inches of insulation, and the rest of the building was sprayed with 2 inches, and it performs very well. So this is a photo of the building as it's being skinned after the spray foam is done. You can see those windows way up there. So once all the construction and the general shell of the building is done, we went and decided to actually hook water up inside the building. We used PEX tubing, and as I mentioned before, we have a very high iron content in our water. This is what it actually looks like today. That was clear, so we have like red pipes now because we run so much water through there. So my tip to you, if you're going to use PEX, is to not use a clear pipe. Unless you like, oh yeah, they're nice and white in that photo right there before they actually had any water through them. So you can kind of see the water set up. We're not going to have hoses on the ground or anything like that. And having the concrete poured at this point too also helps the electrician as he's putting in a lot of electrical conduit and stuff like that, wiring things up. And then we also went with these nice pull-down electrical cords so we can have electrical cords coming down from the ceiling, not have to worry about stringing a electrical cord from the wall across the floor and have it be a problem when you're trying to wheel something around. And we ran into more problems probably than I can remember because of how much humidity and moisture that we are going to be having inside of this building. But who'd have thunk that you would need a special waterproof motor for your garage doors? So it was actually like $3,000 more to do this, but basically the company that we purchased them from said that basically you only get maybe like 2 to 3 years out of the life of a standard duty garage door opener. So by the time you replace them once, you'll have paid for the extra expense to have this air and watertight case in there. And then you can also just see like all the electrical conduit and junction boxes and stuff like that that are required for the rest of the building. And the other thing we had to do was spend a little bit more money on a watertight breaker box because there's a lot of electrical going on in there. And this is our outside power source, that light pole that was in one of the first pictures. All that stuff was on that pole, and we moved it to the side of the building. We knew we needed to have a generator because if we had a storm, we needed to be able to have backup power. And I mean, you can. Right. Yeah. So we oversized the generator just to make sure that, you know, if it was that the tornado comes through, takes down power lines and stuff, we can still function, we can still wash, pack, cool, pump water, do whatever we need to do to keep going. And as we were growing in size too, we developed more, we bought more machines that had 220 needs, so we had to come up with some interesting wiring contraptions to be able to power multiple pieces of equipment at the same time. And this is our bathroom, and the bathroom was like 3 uses actually. So we actually have made sure to build it sturdy enough that we can put like loads on top of the ceiling there. And then we also have the toilet in there obviously, but also the control panel for our radiant heat system. So this is the boiler, this is all the guts of the system with the water pump, return lines, etc. And then these are all the manifolds here that feed back to our radiant heat contraption. So I think Katie was a little bit concerned when I told her the size of the cooler that we wanted to build, and that was the last piece to come in before we could actually move into the pack shed, was to make sure we had the operational cooler, because we'd be kind of back at stage 1 where we would have to like wash things inside our new pack shed and then truck it out to one of the coolers or the shipping containers that we had still scattered all over the property. But this is what the cooler looked like in January of 2019. And I think that's a little bit empty compared to this, but this is what it looked like after a bustling day in the cold Midwest in early November. So we actually put the cooler to very good use, and we filled it up. Actually wish we would have made it a little bit bigger. But when we were getting bids for all the components of the cooler, we really wanted, a garage door opener so you could just stick it on the forklift and go in and out and not have to get off. But I mean, that's like $12,000 when you factor in the motor, the insulation, and all that other guts that go along with it. So there's this company in Milwaukee called Bar Refrigeration, and they sell all used cooler components and an 8x8 door like this that slides, which is still pretty manageable. It's easy to open up and stuff, runs about $2,500, so we decided to go that route instead. And it's actually, when we came in and did some infrared heat testing, that is actually the most well-insulated piece in the whole building is that door. So there's less heat exchange there. Another spot we thought we could cut a corner on was to have the old style analog temp controllers, but those require calibration. So we went back to the more modern and standard Ronco temp controller that has more options and is within like 0.1 degree of accuracy. So, but there's also a learning curve when you go from a CoolBot system to a legitimate commercial cooling system. The zucchini on the left has chilling damage because we never had experience with such powerful equipment before. And this kale over here, only been in the cooler about a day, and it was covered up with huge plastic bags, and still we're experiencing a lot of damage from wilting and low humidity. This is just another video kind of showing the cooler, but then you also see our humidification system that we installed. Right. So basically there's just water that this contraption here diffuses and it blows it out. Comes on 4 times a day. I have no idea. Okay. So anyway, yes?
So do you pre-cool any of your furnace before you put it in the cooler?
No.
Well, we hydro-cool.
Right.
We hydro-cool all the greens.
We'll run those through like a dunk tank and then they go in wet, but it was still pulling all that moisture off of it when you brought them in wet. So, but we've experienced a lot better results by having that, humidifier that goes off 4 times a day. And these are the 2 compressor units on the outside of the building. They're 5 horsepower units. They're sized so that if we do have a problem with one of them can keep the temp and not, completely have us out of a cooling operation. So this is the same side of the building here. We put in drainage around the back of the pack shed where the coolers were at because there's a lot of condensation that's coming out, and we didn't want to have water build up here or anything. So we also did a lot more drainage work to make sure we didn't have any standing water around the outside of the building as well. And the last nugget of everything that kind of came together at the end was getting the shipping containers positioned in spots where they would still be accessible from the main shell and operations of the building. So we had to do some more excavating and get a flat piece of land there, and then the concrete guys we worked with were top notch and were able to really mold the concrete, so we had good drainage, but we also were able to get in and out of them very easily with our forklift or pallet jacks. So this is from another door on the building, so we can actually have access to the shipping containers from 2 different doors. Yeah.
I mean, they're recording it, so. Whose voice do you want on the recording?
Yours.
Mine. So I think as important as the construction is the post-construction, AKA what did we screw up and what would we like to do differently, right? So this is us using it on the inside. I mean, just take a second and go back and remember how we were washing, you know, in a wheelbarrow or in a corn crib with raccoon poo just falling all over our vegetables. Like we're doing much, much better. And so we have this really nice flow now. We can be efficient. You can't possibly see what this is, but this is our workflow. So now we can get back to that idea where there's, you know, dirty comes in here and it gets washed and it goes into the cooler and clean comes out here. So we're really being able to keep the clean and dirty separate, which is nice. People can be working in different zones and get work done. We're not on top of each other. I love this picture because look how happy I am because there's concrete and I have wheels and I don't have to lift those 3 bins up, and we can really use these Nestiflexes. Go ahead. This is our washing, our greens washing, which is away from the roots washing. So the dirty, dirty roots are nowhere near where we're washing our leafy greens now. And look at all that light too. Isn't that natural light? So I miss it, is why I miss it so much. So we have forklift now that we can use. And before, when we used to have to load that market trailer bin by bin by bin, now the forklift doesn't obviously load a pallet in, but we're not lifting as much. And we can get right up to the door. We can load right into our box truck now. Before, this was done by hand. Our delivery driver and myself, we would just load those boxes in one by one, and now we can do it with the pallet jack. So the things that we would do differently, the doors are in all the wrong places, specifically in the winter. We have to walk around outside to get to the boxes and the bags and things. We didn't really think about the doors. The big doors are all fine. It's the little individual doors. So we have to open a big garage door to go get more boxes and bags in the winter, which is just no bueno, it's no good. And we will never be a general contractor again because we're good farmers, we're not good contractors. And we would never use the builder that we used again. So we went cheap. This guy could do it better. He had a lower bid, so we went with him, and he was not professional. He wouldn't pay his workers. His workers came to us wanting to get paid. It was a terrible experience. So, you know, it might cost more to go through Morton or Cleary or these companies who that's their job and they can do it fast, but our builder, don't ask us for the name of the builder because we're not giving it to you. Bigger. Twice as big. I need so much more space in that pack shed. I'm like space hungry now, but really we did not build enough for things like box storage, right? And an office. And the electrical bill, that bid, it came in 3 times more. We had to pay, what did it come in? It was like $3,000 or $4,000 for the bid?
It was like $8,000 for everything.
And we ended up paying
like $22,000, $23,000 for the electrical.
And we kind of topped out at our loan, right? Like we didn't have any more money after that. It was a hard one. So checking up on them midway through, you know, and be like, how are we doing? Are we on track? And then that sediment pit, kind of what Eli was talking about, our drainage is not what we need it to be. So that's something that we're going to be working on. So this is what's next. More concrete because I'm concrete hungry and I love it and I want more concrete. I'm just pave the whole farm in concrete. Not really. But you can never have enough gravel either. I mean, you know, for us, it's the mud season coming up. And no matter how much gravel you have, it just turns to mud. And so different gravel, more gravel. I would like to have a water heater on demand for washing hands because in the winter it's really cold to wash your hands in that water. The water softener just for the bathroom because my sink and my toilet are already stained really, really red. And it's not a big deal, right? But it is to me. I wouldn't do a water softener for the whole operation because we go through so much water. That would be insane. Again, storage, and then putting in that second cooler. So we have this one huge, really big cooler, and what happens next month when we barely have anything to sell? Right now we're powering this massive cooler when we don't need to. So we were going to move some stuff to the shipping containers, but the nice thing would have been to have a smaller cooler that we could move our clean, packed wholesale boxes into that are in a different zone. So I'd like to build another one. And then an office, so I don't have to keep going home to work, right? Okay. A lot. I think we covered most questions. Does anybody have anything that they want to ask? Because we got 10 minutes.
You gonna burn a crib shit?
So that has filled up so quickly with irrigation equipment. We have empty, like those empty big pallet bins are in there. It's full. I don't know what's in the lean. So much junk is in the lean. I have no idea what's in the lean. But yeah, we filled it back up.
I do have a serious question though. So, just out of curiosity, how did you guys get so big so fast?
What?
He likes equipment. We have an incredible demand in our community.
Not a lot of small farms or anything?
You know what? There's a lot of really small farms who aren't necessarily interested in wholesale. And being that we're pretty close to Chicago, not super close. I mean, we're 2.5 hours. We don't do a farmer's market up there or anything, but we do have growth in wholesale that way. We have, a lot of land that we can grow on if we want to. Hans and I are extremely ambitious people. We get bored easily, and equipment. Like you have to grow 5 acres of carrots to get a carrot harvester, right? You have to. So, am I right? Yeah. It didn't need to be that fast, in my opinion, and that's something that I'm sure we'll probably, we could have been better growers. Our employees could have been happier. Hans and I's marriage could have been better if we had, grown slower. But the other really great thing was it was right at this time where the interest in local food was just booming, at least for us in our area. And we got in right at the right time. I think if we had started too slow, we would have missed the boat in a lot of that stuff. So.
I mean, that's always the fear, like when you're growing, is like, that's what fuels your fire to grow, is missing the boat. Like, is this demand going to be here next year? I mean, I'm confident that it will be, but I mean, you want to take advantage of that demand that's there now.
Yeah, but not spend a lot of money either. Right.
Don't take this wrong, because I think I like so impressed and you've done is awesome and everything, but I can't help feeling like the building, like when I compare the corn fruit, it's got so much character.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and I understand the magnitude and everything, and the cold and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, this is not criticism
Sure.
of you, I'm just warning that to do things on a large enough scale to make things work, and if we have to trade aesthetics for like, concrete and
Yeah.
things that have no character.
Steel and yeah.
And so
I don't think you have to. Hans and I were just wanting to get it done quickly so we could keep farming because that's the business that we're in.
how could you have done it without, it would have cost so much to make it artisan, patch it, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. But I think that we have this beautiful mural on our shipping container that's in the front, and that building is still there. We have perennial habitats. It is still a beautiful place. We purposely chose the color of the building that we did so it would blend in with the red oaks that we have and the goldenrod that's growing. So I think you can.
See the integrity of your
Sure.
and of a natural light and all of that.
I think if you saw the corn crib in person, you would not. You would be like, I'm not going in there because it's going to fall on me. I mean, I do think you're right, though. I mean, how do we maintain some of that? Mm-hmm. Well, right. So when I said I want to just pave the whole farm in concrete, when I said that, that thought was in my head like, oh, that sounds terrible. Of course I don't want to do that, right? But I know that whole piece of land would be wiped out and turned into a cornfield if Hans and I weren't growing vegetables on it. And so I think there's, a little give and take. Yeah.
I think dairy barns are very well suited to the flows of Packshed.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a lot of small farms in Wisconsin, like Tippy Produce, they've completely made it work for them, and they're washing and packing. Their dairy barn that they have is a Packshed now.
Yeah.
And they're making it work, and they're making existing infrastructure there work. So
Yeah.
One more question. So, how did you find the resources when you were building, like the cooling area? I mean, who did you reach out to for all that? Anybody in the construction business guided you, or?
well, the guy that was building the building, he worked on cars in the next town over, and kind of, I guess, don't hire your builder to be somebody that does it on the side or tries to manage his car repair business with his building business.
Hans is really good. He's super humble, and he will walk up to anybody and just ask, like, tell me all about it, or can I see it, touring those. When we would tour these farms, we'd look at their refrigeration equipment and ask them, you know, where did you get this and what do you have? And so I think touring the farms are really helpful because a lot of people already know this stuff, so why you don't have to recreate it. But being open to asking instead of, you know, for me, I'd be like, oh, I already know. Even though I don't. I have no idea. So I think that helped. That helped too. And trust the good contractors that we had, like our HVAC person, he's a professional. I mean, and he would say, well, I don't know because I've never built it for a Packshed, but I'll find out. And he, you know, he would help us about the humidifiers and that type of thing. But
So if you're a small farm just starting out, what would you say would be the first piece of washable equipment you should get? If you're gonna invest in washing equipment.
Like actual washing equipment or a structure?
The washable equipment.
a dunk tank,
The what?
a dunk tank, because it's cheap. You know, you can get it really cheap. You can get it anywhere. You can wash anything in a dunk tank. Your greens should be dunked somehow, preferably not like in a 5-gallon bucket, right? I'm trying to think what Devin has, because Devin is like that. He's just starting out with no real infrastructure. Honestly, I think for us, the thing that we didn't have in the beginning that I wish we did have that really did affect the quality of our produce was refrigeration of some type. When we first started, we call it the Henry Brockman method. He's a farmer up by us who's been doing this forever and doesn't really believe in any kind of technology. And he would fill 1 gallon milk jugs with water and freeze them. And then he stacks his produce up, right, 4 or 5 bins tall, and he takes the lid off of the gallon milk jug and turns it on its side. And the water will slowly melt and drip off and trickle down through and keep things cold. But it'll never remove that field heat out, right? And maybe for roots, that's one thing, but for heads of lettuce, when it's 95 degrees out in the back of your truck and it's blowing around, I mean, it's just refrigeration. So we did that for a while until we could afford, you know, a cooler of some sort, any sort. It's better, you know, even a CoolBot and an AC unit is way better than the Henry Brockman method, so.
Concrete floors, did you guys put any kind of texturing on those? Or does it like a slippery?
Yeah, there is a little bit of texture. I thought they were so beautiful before the texture, and I tried to tell the concrete guys not to put it on there. And they're like, no, you have to. Because I thought it was going to be harder to clean, you know, because of all the mud that was going to get on there, but it really isn't. And there is a little bit of texture on there, yeah, which is good, because you're right. It already is a little slippery anyway. God bless that concrete, though. Seriously. I mean, I don't know if there's a lot of factors, but in the first quarter, our sales are up, what did I say, 37%? Because we can be efficient and we can take on larger orders. We can do it faster. I mean, it's good stuff. Yeah, all right. We good?
I think we got time for one more.
Okay.
You had a slide up earlier that had a bunch of questions that you could think about when planning.
Yeah.
Could you put that back up?
Yep. We'll go through. Give me a minute.
Did you have to change the number of employees you had?
Over time, I mean, we started with just an intern, and
So did this create any efficiencies that you could have less employees?
no, it's created more demand, so I need more employees. That's the other part to this is that, I'm sorry, I'm getting there, Ann, hold on just a second. This is a whole new space that's huge, and the workflows and the systems that we had before in that tiny little space is completely different, so I don't know that we're saving a tremendous amount of time yet, because we don't know how to use this space efficiently yet, but I mean, we will for sure.
We're also working our employees before, 10-hour days. So
There you go.
the goal is to have more employees, have more manageable days, so people don't get burnt out and they want to come back.
Yeah.
Are you doing farm tours?
Yeah, we'd love to do farm tours. We're actually at the end of March. The Land Connection has a booth in the trade show at the end of March. We're doing an on-farm work safety course that's geared towards packsheds and lifting and safety and all that kind of stuff, what not to do. And so you are more than welcome to come to that, but the flyers are in there.
sharing that information with